Hello there, this is Stan, and this is a how-to video on duplicating a toy zombie head with ComposiMold self-hardening epoxy clay. I 3D printed this zombie head from a design by Mixtech on Thingiverse.com, and I'll be using the reusable molding putty, ImPRESSive putty, to make a mold and then pressing in the epoxy clay. I've already heated up the ImPRESSive putty in the microwave for about 40 seconds. Be careful from the microwave, it can be hot, so I let it cool until it is easy to handle. Knead it around your hands a little bit just to make sure the temperature is equalized and any lines are out of the surface. Then I press the putty on and around the zombie head. I start by pressing the putty over the face because that's the most important aspect of the mold, so I want to capture all the detail. So I press in and around the mouth and nose and work my way up and around the zombie head. I don't need a mold release on most objects because the putty already has an activator in that acts as a mold release. Sometimes it's scary because it will feel like it's going to stick, but after it cools it comes right off. The only exceptions to this are wood or cardboard or paper materials. You should definitely seal those materials first with either a shellac or some type of urethane spray first. Now we need to add a little parting line on the back of this so it makes it easier to put the epoxy putty in, and it also makes it easy to pull the epoxy clay subject out afterwards. This mold cools to solidify, so after about an hour in the freezer it was ready to go. We opened it up on the parting line that we created and we pull out the original. The nice part about the ImPRESSive putty is that it is reusable, so you can make lots of molds with the same material just by remelting it and reusing it. Mold is ready and we will now put in the epoxy clay. ComposiMold's epoxy clay is a two-part self-hardening modeling compound that can be sculpted, formed, and cast. Working time is about 2 to 3 hours and it cures to a strong plastic clay in about 15 hours. The epoxy clay can be colored with pigments, dyes, and acrylic paint. After it is cured, it can be sanded, drilled, machined, and painted. Start by mixing the two parts together in equal amounts. What's really unique about the ComposiMold epoxy clay is that it is very forgiving. You can be off in your measurements by 10 or even 15% and still have a strong, solid casting, as long as you mix well. So take several minutes to mush these two parts together. After you have mixed the two halves together thoroughly, you want to put it into your mold. We're going to start by putting it into the face part of it because that, as we said before, is the most important part of it. We want to make sure we get the noses and the mouth and the ears filled with the clay. So we're going to push it right into those areas, and then we're going to put clay around the rest of those as well. And we want to have a little bit of hole in the bottom of this one, so we use less of the epoxy clay, and then two, because we want to put a rod in this as a way to hold it up. So it'll be either a finger to hold it up onto your finger like a finger puppet, or a little stick that we're going to put in there. So we take off and we put the clay in there. With 2 to 3 hours of working time with the ComposiMold epoxy clay, there's plenty of time for us to fill this mold. The epoxy clay has a similar texture and feel as polymer clays that you're used to, typically like the Sculpted or Fimo. This is very similar to that, although possibly a little bit less firm than those two materials. The ImPRESSive putty also works with lots of other materials, so we could have used an epoxy resin such as our ComposiCast resin. You could use waxes, you could use soaps, you can use other resins, and we also have a food-safe version of this, so you can make a zombie head into chocolate, which would be a pretty wild Halloween present, wouldn't it? Okay, you get the idea of me pushing in the epoxy clay into the ImPRESSive putty, so let's speed this up a second. Listen to those race cars. Now we let that epoxy clay solidify overnight and it becomes a hard epoxy clay. And we pull it out of our mold. You ready for the unveiling? On your mark. Ta-da! The zombie head. We now have a zombie finger puppet. This is how you make an ImPRESSive putty mold with epoxy clay. You can now remelt the mold to make another one, or you can make more duplicates of this guy the same way. Thank you so much for watching, and hopefully you enjoy making your own figures. To learn more, go to ComposiMold.com. You can download your free ebook, and we also have lots of other videos online as well. Thank you.